Ladies and okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to this last session this evening, which is on tools of implementation to deal with water quality, and we're going to discuss government's roles and challenges in how they address water quality issues. As we know, governments play a key role in achieving the water quality targets that are set out in the proposed SDGs through setting and implementing water quality policy frameworks and standards, by regulating the discharge of pollutants into the environment, of addressing issues such as wastewater management, recycling and reuse. And we've also heard yesterday in the framing session that water quality is one of the issues that has largely not been addressed too much by government so far. So there's quite a bit of need to catch up related to water quality issues or issues related to WASH. We've also heard another fundamental challenge that we face is the lack of data that we have on water quality, but also the lack of willingness to share data. These are a couple of the issues that we'll try to address today in the session, focusing on tools and ways forward in which water quality can be addressed by governments, and provide some examples of how this can be taken forward. Given the time, I don't want to spend much more on introducing the session and hand over directly to Thomas Chiramba, who will give the overview presentation. He's Chief of the Freshwater and Ecosystems Unit at UNEP, and we look forward to his introduction. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jens. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the last session. I hope I'll be able to keep you awake. It's about governance around water quality. I'm making this presentation. Initially, it was supposed to be made by Johannes Kuhlmann. For those that do not know him, Johannes is the director of the Federal Institute of Hydrology in Germany. He was supposed to give this overview presentation, and then the last minute, unfortunately, couldn't make it. Then I had to step in. So for some of the points that I'll be raising here are from him and many others that have worked on the presentation. I will take you through the presentation. It's a long one, so please forgive me if I'm a little faster in some instances, because it's about, I would like to catch up a little bit on the time, but at the same time be able to cover the issues that I think would provide a good basis for our discussion later. How is it organized? I will give a little bit of a background on water quality, the rationale behind it. Then the second part will be looking a little bit at the tools that are available at the UN level. And then the next part of the presentation will be on some case studies that we could build on from countries from across the globe. That's how it's structured, so I'll take you through it. Clearly, water quality is a very important element of water resources management, but unfortunately, like what has been said, it has been neglected a bit, but ambient water quality is key in defining both the suitability of water for both human consumption, which we have traditionally focused on, as well as the health of water ecosystems, which we have not focused on, and which we know from the Millennium Ecosystems Assessment report, which came out in 2005, that they're degrading fastest amongst all the other ecosystems that we studied then, which at the same time is impacting on development, on livelihoods, and all sorts of things, and which I think in the SDG paradigm we will have to focus on. And as you can see here in the work of the Open Working Group, it has been said before, a lot of effort has been made by many people, including UN Water, to broaden the water agenda, the global water agenda, to include aspects related to water quality, related to ecosystems, related to efficiency, and related to integrated water resources management, and we're very happy about it. We think these are key to sustainable development. And for water quality, I've just highlighted two here that are important, that are in goal 6. And of course, the main aspects, I think, which is very important, is to understand the goal itself, that is about ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. And water quality is sitting within that. Key outcomes of the water quality target, clearly public health protection, but also ecosystems protection for their services. And key aspects that are there in the goal are that drive or that can help achieve the goal, which are new and very exciting, is the reuse of wastewater and sludge, as well as also recovery of resources like nutrients and energy. And just to highlight very quickly, some of the synergism between ecosystem services and water quality around the maintaining the environment, maintaining the environmental capital that we have. Here are some of the benefits: eutrophication reduction, for drinking water, good quality for drinking and recreation are some of the benefits that are there from water quality. But also there are also some benefits that we accrue from good water, from ecosystems that are maintained by good water quality. The ecosystems themselves are very important to cleansing water. We know the role wetlands play to biodiversity, and would like to maintain those roles because they're important for livelihoods. Moving on, I said it yesterday, and I will not belabor it anymore. It was also repeated by Jens here. Water quality is one aspect that is really been neglected in water resources management, but also in development in general. But like I said yesterday, it's worsening by the day. And like I said earlier on, if you look at the diagram there, which is blue, which is something blue in the middle, that's the main components around the proposed water goal. Water quality is sitting right in there, and that came from UN Water, which recognized the priority need to address water quality. Moving on to the second part of the presentation, where I'm looking at what are the tools that are there at global level, and particularly those that are provided by UN agencies. There are a few that are being highlighted here, mainly around monitoring. GEMSTAT, for example, is the only global data sets that we know collects data from rivers. It's provided by countries, but it's the only global data that we have that collects real data. We know that its weaknesses, that is patchy, but also we know some of the proposals within there, like the water quality index that is being developed with the proposal with that, which is very useful. There's Aquastat, which is kept by FAO, our sister agency, and it's just got a lot of variables and useful information, which with very good global coverage. But of course, it also has its weaknesses. It's not about water quality data on water quality itself, but the variables that can be linked or can be used to identify some of the drivers around water quality. Moving on, a recent exciting development is the World Water Quality Assessment process that is taking place right now, which is trying to come out with the first comprehensive World Water Quality report. But before doing that, because of the water quality data challenges, it's proposing a methodology to do that, which combines measured data from GEMSTAT, but also modeling the data that we get from Aquastat. Observations that are there. The data are not fit for purpose. It's like I mentioned, I think yesterday, there are spatial gaps, but we don't know where they are. But also the parameters, they're incomplete. Like microbial parameters are not there under GEMSTAT, for instance, which I've said is an important data source. But there are encouraging developments in terms of developing indicators. Like I mentioned earlier on, GEMSTAT has some ideas there that are being looked at. But also even countries themselves, they've moved on that, and they've started looking at some indicators, and there are good lessons to be learned there. So while we don't know exactly the status of the water quality across the globe, but what we know is that there are very promising approaches, and governments have already taken the initiative of moving that agenda forward. Here we have examples from Brazil, Colombia, the EU, and Canada. Some of you are familiar with them. And the water quality indicators that we can borrow from these, and processes that we can borrow from these initiatives, which is very good news because we're not starting from fresh. We have somewhere to start off with. Here you can see the example from Brazil. Whilst I don't speak Portuguese, but I'm very much informed with those that do know Portuguese, and with Antonio is going to talk more about it. Brazil has got an interesting, it's started in a big way to look at water quality monitoring, and here you can see that the range of parameters they're looking at, and how that then combined and to come up with this water quality index, and then how then the status of water quality is then graded according to the best, what is good, excellent water quality, and bad water quality. So we're not starting from scratch, and we have a lot of opportunities, and which we should maximize as we move into the SDG paradigm. This whole process is bringing together these data sets that up to now perhaps have not been quite linked, but they're there, and we can bring them together. We have an opportunity of bringing them together, and then be able to say something about water quality, which is key, is like I said yesterday, to any actions on sustainable management of water quality. And this process of developing the SDG is also enhancing cooperation between data owners and IT, and to use new technology, IT, to do that. What is important here is that we also have an opportunity of harvesting or collecting existing information to improve spatial, temporal, and parameter coverage. What is important here is a lot of you might think that the issue of data is only for developing countries where the data is very patchy, non-existent, and so on. That is indeed true. But you might be surprised that even for developed countries, they only share data in a summarized data. They don't actually share even detailed data. So the big issues, negotiations that also have to take place even there for them to share detailed data. So it's a big issue, the issue of data, but also the issue of providing and of opening doors for sharing data. The issue that I've just highlighted, the issue of developing indicators within the SDG framework, that's a huge opportunity, because then we can debate about water quality, and then look at the issue of coming up with acceptable targets, water quality targets across different parameters, but also sampling of the core parameters that we agree on, because one challenge we have is that there's a lot of monitoring. That's what a lot of governments also say. They're monitoring a lot of parameters, but the question is, are we monitoring the right parameters, and also are we monitoring the right things and using it for the right purpose? The big challenge is there. We might also, while we complain that there's no data, there might be too much, which is not probably useful. There's need for us to streamline that. And of course, the issue of coming up with data that is comparable across board, between various countries and regions. I think there are huge opportunities within this context. Again, I just want to highlight one thing, that data availability is a big challenge. And those, you can see these two quotes from those people, from some experts that have been dealing with water quality data, what they say about data, and this is a fact that we all know. Now let me move on to the regional case studies. These case studies that I'm going to present here are from across the globe, but also at different levels, and also addressing different aspects related to water quality. I think those that came up with case studies here did us a lot of service, and they serve one very important purpose, that we are not starting from scratch. We have a lot that we can learn and that we can build on as we try to move towards achieving the proposed SDGs. The purpose of this is also to reassure countries that, look, you you can work towards achieving these targets, and let's learn more from one another. Let me start off with the example from the Republic of Korea, a very interesting example. I will just introduce some of the main elements. The panelists presented some of these case studies. They will discuss more of the details around these case studies. But the one in Korea, for instance, was looking at the issue of disparity between urban and rural areas, and also in particular focusing on the challenges on wastewater management, treatment, and so on in rural areas. And some of the tools that Korea has come up with around discharge water quality standards, and the attempt to address issues of pollution of lakes, but also issues like around endocrine disruptors. Key also of some of the challenges that they had is the issue of non-point pollution and how to control it, particularly how to deal with intermittent and but very serious pollution from stormwater, for instance. Some key lessons learned from Korea are that investing at the right time is very important. In their case, they started developing infrastructure with international assistance, but then quickly moved on to use their own resources, indigenous resources. But as they did that, there were opportunities to create growth, employment and growth. And they also, in the process, were able to, there are also good lessons to be learned in terms of how do you meet the costs, both of infrastructure development as well as maintenance, operation maintenance, which was important, and how do you transform initially from startup assistance or seed funding you get through international assistance or foreign aid, and also build in the element of indigenous funding. I highlighted again the issue of efficient operational management. And here I wanted to bear in mind that we are talking about mainly in wastewater in rural areas which were neglected. And the issue which a lot of governments battle with, there are good lessons from Korea to learn in terms of regulation of discharges, of wastewater discharges, enforcement. It's a big challenge that we see here. How it was also incorporated into this as they invested, as they did all sorts of things to improve their water quality. Moving on to Brazil, also an exciting example here, where the big major challenge was around untreated sewage discharges, toxic materials, and monitoring deficits. There was no monitoring, and as development took place. Again, this is as a result of perhaps a lot of investment which went into water supply, and then, but there was no perhaps corresponding investment in wastewater treatment. So they had to deal with the issues that emanated from that. And issues around capacity building came up very strongly. The National Water Agency created a national water quality evaluation program, and this framework was established at federal level, but then again, this is a good case where the implementation of that framework was done at state level, which is managing the monitoring networks, but also which are within the national framework that has been established. It's a good example to show how other legislation have spin-off benefits to, for example, what we do in water. In this case, there's this Environmental Information Law of 2003, which actually provided for, which requires states to report on the status of water quality, for example, and make that information public, and it's a good case which shows how public awareness could actually push policy, drive policy in the right direction around water quality. In this case, the National Water Quality Evaluation Program, which was established by the national agency, it's called ANA, in 2000, it started this whole process of monitoring, but also reporting, and the first report in 2005. And in this report, it clearly shows the benefits that are associated with with investments in water quality. And that is a very important thing to not only to invest, but also ultimately to show the benefits, improvements in water quality that are associated with the investments, which then also creates a case for itself for further funding. It also highlights the challenges that are associated with the huge country, Brazil. So there's the Amazon, which you all know, accessibility is very difficult, so there are a lot of logistical challenges there. But what it shows is that there is some movement taking place. Let me move on to our third case, which is Duero Basin Agency here in Spain. And this deals with sustainable wastewater treatment for small villages, a problem that most developed countries have. How to maintain small-scale wastewater treatment plants in the villages is a big issue here. And then here, what is interesting about this case study is also about dealing with local authorities and creating awareness at local authority level, particularly local level decision makers, alongside the citizens. What impact then it had in terms of what was done. In terms of technology, there are some 13 pilot wastewater treatment plants that were established, and innovative wastewater treatment, taking into account also the whole concept of the green economy. And then in terms of capacity building, there's this concept or this project on mayor schools where there was an effort in this case to try to, first of all, bring the mayors to their attention that they have to apply to comply to certain regulations regarding water quality. But also, as that was done, they were also taken to field visits to see the negative impacts, and then they were also, within that context, the local authorities were also given some access or link to where they could get resources, financial resources to do the wastewater treatment, and some guidance were provided on how to go about it. Lessons learned, of course, commitment at local level, at river basin level, by managers and technicians is very important, and also support from NGOs and demonstrating good results. All that is very, very important was very important within that context of that project to show progress. Of course, there are always things to improve on in terms of getting the technicians to deal with the public. It's not always easy, and communication generally between people should be improved. And the last case that we have here is the WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization is leading on this project, and it's WIPO Green, so it's led by the World Intellectual Property Organization. In short, what was created here, what has been created, which is quite new, is an interactive marketplace, a platform which connects the technology which is available, those that are looking for technology, those that can fund it, that all then bring together, and up to date, within a very short time, it has about 400 technologies and about 10 water sector technologies, which is relevant to us, and several partners and users that have subscribed to that. And like I said, its objective is to facilitate technology transfer by connecting different actors in the technology commercialization chain. And some of the activities that are highlighted in the case study are pilot projects on wastewater treatment in Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And again, here within that context, identifying relevant technologies, identifying providers, and also trying to match all these people with even financiers to get things moving. These are the case studies we have, and I hope you agree with me. They come from all across the world, different levels, different issues, but all, at the end of the day, they demonstrate that we're not starting from scratch. We have something to build on, and I think this is a very encouraging base. After I had started off by saying we don't know the water sector, it has been the water quality, the state of water quality, and that it has been neglected. But then we have all these things that also show that where it has been prioritized, there are good examples to be taken up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for providing this overview presentation and presenting the cases that had been submitted. I would like to ask now the panelists to come to the podium. And I would like to ask Anja von der Ropp, she's legal officer at the World Intellectual Property Organization, and present that case. We have Yong Ho An, Senior Research Fellow of Planning and Coordination Office in the Korea Environment Institute in Korea, and Antonio Felix Dominguez, Articulations and Communications Coordinator of the Agência Nacional de Águas from Brazil. And Thomas had presented the case also of Rosa Huertas from the Duero River Basin Authority in Spain. Unfortunately, she was not able to come, but we're glad that her case was still be possible to be showcased. I also made a mistake earlier in not introducing myself, so that you don't have a stranger talking to you. My name is Jens Liebe. I work for the UN Water Decade Program on Capacity Development, and as Thomas rightly pointed out, we're organizing this session together with the German Federal Institute of Hydrology. Again, I can welcome Thomas Giramba, who will lead us through this panel discussion and moderate the session. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you again. Is this on? Thank you very much, Jens, again. You have to put up with me again for maybe another hour. I will facilitate a little bit the discussion between the panelists we have here and yourselves. How is it going to work? I will ask them to say a few things about the case studies that they presented. I attempted to present them to the participants there, but I might have missed one or two things. But also, there might be one or two things that I talked about that are particularly important that you might want to emphasize on. I would like to give you a few minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, each one of you, to talk about the challenges that you faced, that you saw in the case study, and also some of the key issues that you think are there. Keep it short, 2 minutes, each one of you, because we have more time to explain some of these points as we move forward. I will start with you, John. Would you like to talk a little bit about your case and emphasize those points that you think I've mentioned, but also some things that I've left out?
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Actually, the water quality issue is very complicated. Generally, the water quality is highly related to the water quantity directly, but also relate to the development issue too. So basically, the pressure of the water quality management coming from the increasing the water demand from the urbanization or industrialization, even the climate change impact too. This is general the picture about the water quality issue. In addition to the key point that Thomas mentioned in the presentation, I'd like to mention two aspects of the challenge. The first challenge is about the institutional fragmentation and the over decentralization of water utility sector. It is very critical, especially in the rural area. This segregation has turned out to be one of the barrier to the holistic management of water uses or water treatment, even for the water reuse too. Those are very strongly demanded due to climate change issue, because in order to developing the appropriate infrastructure and developing the resilience. it is very important because the whole of the government's response to the multiple challenges to water quality management are necessary for the water security. In many cases, I think that this will require kind of some reformation of the water governance. Another thing that I want to comment is about the securing the sustainable financing system. The revenue for the public water sector is not enough to cover the expenses. So many the developing country, the government, the subsidies has been the major source for the balancing the expense and improving, even expanding of the national water facility. Also, there is also imbalance with the different scale between the production cost and the service therapy, depending on the regional factors such as the service population and economic well-being. So it is big the challenge to be solved in the water quality management fundamentally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will move on to you, Antonio. One thing I wanted to mention here is that the things that the role of government, it's understood as to be around policy framework, standards, regulating discharges, and incentives for recycling and so forth. So if you could make your comments, like he said, like he's done it, within that context, so that it addresses also what we expect from governments. Here we go.
Gracias a todos. Buenas tardes. Quiero agradecer.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the work of Jens Lieb as a coordinator. The presentation by Mr. Thomas Chiramba has been a very good one, a very interesting one. And I would like to complement this. I have one word which is key for the success of the work that we started in Brazil 3 or 4 years ago, which is the building of the creation of a national program on water quality. Brazil is a large country, and it is especially a federation where the provinces are also the owners of water. They are responsible, together with the federal government, for the segregation of the use of water. And therefore, you can only achieve goals if you incorporate these provinces into the debate, the discussion on the planning, work planning, in order to build together. Otherwise, it is not possible to do a good job. Out of the 26 provincial states or provinces in Brazil, half of the states of the provinces are working very strongly on this water quality network, together with all the works that are foreseen, like public servant capacity building, training, standardization of monitoring processes, also the sampling of water, or the water sampling, the depth, all these parameters. How do we keep these water samples with a good quality until these samples reach the labs? We are operating a network of 3,600 points of water collection. The 3,000 belong to the federal, 2,000 belong to the federal government, and 1,600 belong to the provinces. And we want to add further 2,000 gauging points or measuring points and to include them in this network, which is a network of volunteers. The federal government does not oblige the provinces to enter into this network, but there is an incentive on the part of the federal government with the money that we put in the budget, an annual budget, and all the training effort, the publications, etc., are included. We can do, as Mr. Thomas has mentioned, the work in Brazil can be carried out making a good work. We have succeeded in obtaining good data production, and society at large is very, very well informed about the problems that are variable, that are many and numerous, but they are also well informed about the good results obtained in the last years. In 2011, we were able to publish a very good manual with the Sao Paulo agency. That is a manual where you can find all the problems that appear in water sampling and collection for the indicators, and you can see all the indicators, the water, the sediments, everything is in the webpage, in the website of our agency. Well, I would say that the work methodology, the key work methodology is, you have to take into account that Brazil is a very large country with large disparities, and in society, I think the key word is integration of work of federal government with provincial states or provinces and with society at large who is inhabiting these basins. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've been asked to speak on technology, and well, as you can imagine, we don't. Where we come into the picture is when it's about dissemination of technologies that are needed to meet certain standards. And if I'm sort of focusing more on the role of governments in this technology dissemination and transfer, one point I'd like to make is that, in my view, it's not for the government to pick certain technologies. It's more the role of the government is to provide frameworks in which technology development and dissemination are possible. And there are a number of factors that might influence that. One of which is information, then innovation systems, and part of that is also the intellectual property system, then competition policies, standards, financing structures, and so on. And that's also something that relates to the role of the government is regulation and setting standards, of course, for or targets to be met by the actors in the market. And this has been written upon, and that has been also mentioned in the business sessions this morning, that more stringent targets can provide a big incentives for companies to adopt new technologies. If I'm talking more about governments or government entities in the role of technology seekers and in about picking if they're sort of in the role of identifying a technology that is suitable in a certain setting. I think one of the most important points to mention is that a definition of the need in question is the basic starting point. And seekers at all levels, be that government or be that companies, are facing some problems in doing that. Because selecting the best technology is only possible if you know what you need and what the circumstances are in which you operate. Sort of geographical settings, infrastructure settings, the climate, because there have been many examples of technology transfer of technologies that didn't persist in humid or tropical environments. Then, of course, people who are able to use and maintain the technology. So that then relates again to the to maybe capacity building aspects or training, and that is also not true. Not only true for maybe government entities, but also probably companies adopting specific technologies. Another point that I want to make is as I said, a definition of the need and the circumstances in a specific setting, but then also information on available technologies and the possibility to compare the different aspects of technologies. And price, of course, is also an important component in this. And maybe something that I'd like to relate to our marketplace. So as I said in the beginning, it's not our role to help governments pick a certain technology, but what we want to do is to provide a platform where you can find information on different technologies and where you can also compare them. But also, if you're in the role of looking for specific technologies, you can describe your need, and there's also assistance available in defining those needs and invite providers to make corresponding technology offers. And that would also put you in a position to choose maybe from different offers. So that's the guidance that we see provide on the seeker side, but relating back to the innovation system, there's also some elements of that project that we are developing in order to help local innovators and SMEs to commercialize their technologies and to promote the technologies, but also to provide tools for them to identify markets and protect or manage intellectual property that's related with it. So with the project that specific sub-project that you've mentioned in Indonesia and Vietnam and the Philippines, I think it's too early because it's an ongoing project to share experiences. We are in the process of working with entities in the countries to define the needs and mapping potentially corresponding technology solutions. But this is also an invitation to participate if that's relevant for you, or if you have contacts in those countries, or if there's a potential to replicate similar projects in your countries. Just some very early observations again is that more stringent regulation appears to be the biggest incentives for entities to adopt new technologies and cleaner technology solutions, because in the case of Vietnam, there's been more strict requirements for industry parks. So we find more interest in that country in adopting new solutions than we find, for instance, in Indonesia. And then, but maybe that's also self-evident, but and I've said that also before, but that the technology itself is only an element. It also comes with people who are able to use that, and also other aspects such as financing solutions and so on. And what we're trying to do with the platform is also to connect the different stakeholders who can play a role in that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anya. If you could give it to Antonio. Antonio. How does it work? Because then it has resulted in the citizenry putting pressure on the governments. And if you could respond to that.
Bueno, esto es...
Well, this is something very strong. It is included in the water law, in the water legislation from the year 1997, when Brazil underwent this democracy process. They have set up a constitution where water was declared a public right, so water is a public good. And in the Constitution of the 98, in the biggest chart law of Brazil, we can read that we had to build a system of information in order to provide all the citizens with the informations of water. How much do they have of water? Which is the quality of water? Which are the problems? So, Mr. Thomas, this is a very big challenge that we've got in Brazil, but now we are going forward. We're producing all these things. I think that this is the biggest product we are going to have. This is on our website too, with the data of water quality, availability of water. Everything is there on our website. This is the result of a very big effort and work, but we still have a long way to go and much more work to do so that we can say that we are managing water in a democratic way with competencies. I don't know whether I have answered to your question.
I know that within your legislation in Brazil, you are required to do that, and that's very good, and I think other governments should learn from it. How much do you share your data, water quality data, with your neighbors? With surrounding countries?
Why we are going forward quite a lot, we're progressing quite a lot. But this work, of the quality of water, I'm talking about the water quality, because we share the volume with all our neighbors. But regarding the water quality, we are starting and getting strong with Uruguay. We are starting this work in a very strong way in Brazil too. Because as we all are a federation, those are provincial states that we didn't know the data one from the other. We started 3-4 years ago. Sao Paulo didn't know, for instance, the data of the state of Minas Gerais. Rio de Janeiro didn't know the quality data water of Sao Paulo. So we are changing all this data, and this is complementary information, Mr. Thomas. As you have said, we are starting a very strong work with you and water, and we have got great expectations. And Brazil is going to learn a lot from this program, from the James Water. And the will of Brazil is that we can become a platform from other neighboring countries, brother countries of South America, such as Paraguay, Bolivia, Argentina, Peru, and we are starting many joint works of monitoring of quantity and also perhaps of water quality too.
Who funds this monitoring? Where does the money come from? And why is it not difficult for most other countries have problems in funding monitoring, but why is it different in the case of Brazil? Perhaps other countries might learn from that.
Okay.
Yeah, in Brazil there is a speciality, as we say. There is a black fruit we have got in Brazil called jabuticaba, which only grows in Brazil. There's a jabuticaba that we made up as the biggest part of the electrical generation comes from the hydraulic power, from the water. All the Brazilian people, when they are going to pay in their accounts this electrical energy, we have got more or less 6% of the total amount of this account, which is devoted, which is allocated in a funding. And this funding, 90% of that, we send it to the states for those municipalities that receive the impact of this electrical generation that have been flooded. When the dam was constructed, for instance, this made farming not viable anymore. So 10% of the 6% of this energy account of all the Brazilian citizens is devoted or allocated in a fund, and part of these resources are derived to the National Water Agency to implement this kind of work, such as the water quality, monitoring the whole water in Brazil, both quantity and quality. We have got the federal government. The federal government had a network of more or less 7,000 stations in order to collect the data of the rainfall and the volume of water in the river sheds. And we funded this network too. A network that nowadays we have got more or less 3,600 watching points just for this quality water, with several parameters, indicators of the water qualities. And these things are really very new, very recent. It has started 4 years ago, more or less.
Let me move on to Anya, to you. You said that governments don't choose. It's not their role to choose the technologies. My question to you, who does choose the technologies?
When I'm saying that they don't choose technologies in the regulation, I think that government policies shouldn't be sort of promoting certain technologies, but should be picking or should be setting the framework or in setting standards and in standards and regulation. Who is choosing technologies? It depends who is the one who's operating, for instance, water treatment systems. So that's what I also said earlier. It might be municipal governments if it's in the hand of public entities, but it could be also private companies, but it could be also NGOs sort of looking for technology solutions. So whoever is using or seeking to use a technology is the one who is picking the technology.
Good. Now, one of the major challenges we will have to achieve this target, the SDG we're talking about, it has innovative elements like promoting reuse, resource recovery, and all such elements. And so innovation in terms of technologies will be critical. How do we promote it? How do we promote innovation?
The governments or
the international community? Because I think for some of the issues to move forward on them, we need to be seen to be innovative. Mm-hmm. We need to bring in innovative technologies. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure whether just by providing accessibility, that's it, but there's a big issue of how do we support innovation.
Well, also, as I said before, I think there again, the role of the government is to providing the right environment for innovation to happen. And that might happen, different entities again. The innovation itself could be universities or research institutions, but then there's also the private sector who carries out a lot of research. And the question here is how to get those innovative solutions from the labs to the market for people to adopt them. And again, I think there are many aspects to that innovative environment, or an environment, regulatory environment that's conducive to that, both fostering innovation and then making that development happen. So that concerns again education at the universities, but also staff that could work in companies, and then sort of intellectual property framework in order to incentivize also private companies to invest, and then also an environment that supports startups to bring technologies that are developed in universities out of the university or academic context, and to then support again small medium enterprises.
Okay. My last question this time around is the human face, the human dimension in this whole technology transfer and so on, cultural aspects. That's the human face to it. How do you deal with them within the context of WIPO?
Well, I think technology transfer will not happen via a platform. So it's from a person to a person, and also technology transfer doesn't have to take place in the form, or there are many sort of different forms of technology transfer, but one of them is also training, and getting to know people and finding people who can sort of work with you, and I think that's a very important factor. And then, of course, dealing if we're talking about technology transfer from one cultural context to another, dealing with those differences. And in WIPO, or in that project, what we're trying to do is to build up a network of partners who can or have knowledge of different markets and can help in those different markets, and have also expertise with regard to different technical fields.
Thank you. Let's move on to Young. Amazing case of Korea. You talked about the reforms. That reforms are key to pushing forward the agenda on water quality. How did Korea put in place reforms so quickly and implemented them so quickly and have this much impact? What are the lessons to learn from what the government did there?
Well, actually, important thing is that it's the government law in the developing period that I mentioned actually yesterday in the regional special workshop. I think the government made the water sector development as an integral part of the transformation of economy in the developing period is a very important thing. Also, second thing is the government also adapted the challenging the development goal of the water quality, but also created some the monitoring and reporting system to to get the goal. It's the very important the role of the government. And I'd like to say some the implementation tool about this the water quality. So first, right now the central government is working on the reformation of the water sector. So right now the government is pushing strongly through the consolidation of the water works and the wastewater infrastructure, institutional structure. So as a result, right now, the management unit, which were scattered over more than 100 local units, they will be consolidated to just 39 units, based on watershed they belong to. The purpose of this is to improve the operation efficiency, including the water quality, and also they want to get more sustainable the financing mechanism using some PPP program. It's the public-private partnership. So government now is introducing the PPP into the water sector to increasing the efficiency and reducing the operation cost. It can help to further adjusting the service therapy to be regional level. So it's a big challenge, but it's working now. Also, it's not actually my question, but I want to mention about some water quality monitoring. So actually, Korea has the water quality monitoring system that is very strong, based on regulation. In terms of technology application, we got the remote water quality monitoring system, which is regulated by regulation. And every wastewater treatment plant or the sewage water treatment plant have to install the remote water quality monitoring station. And that data is transferred to the control station, which is operated by the government associate agency. So they are monitoring the water quality online. And then if the dischargers violated water quality, they have to pay the fine. It's very strong regulation. Also, it's it's good case of the application of technology. That the remote sensing of the water quality is the technology application. So that I want to comment. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that addition. But that brings me to the next question. It's the issue of enforcement. It's issue of enforcement. Certainly, I think from Korea there are lessons to be learned. What lessons would you share with us here on how Korea is able to ensure that there's enforcement in terms of complying with the regulations?
Yeah, actually, the water quality is very depending on the value of water, actually. So right now, the Korea's water price is very cheap. I think the cheapest in the world. So the public think that the water price is almost free. So in order to managing the water quality sustainably, we need to educate the public about the value of water. It's very important thing. So we want to change the public conception about the water price in order to make the sustainable mechanism of the financing. Yeah.
Wow, that raises yet another question, Yong. It's the issue of financing. In the case study, it clearly shows that you've been able to move from a situation where you were dependent on foreign assistance, and now we're able to fund the development and operations of your maintenance of your infrastructure. How did that happen when the price is not right?
Actually, as I mentioned before, the government subsidies is the important role in the beginning of the developing period. But right now, the developing period is end now in Korea, and then we just move to the maintenance period. So in this time, we have to get the sound financing system based on full cost coverage. So in order to do that, the government is pushing the consolidation of the water work too. And also, in terms of the regional level, we got some regulation about the water quality management based on the financing. So we set up the Beijing Management Fund. It can use for the water quality management, also invest some the facility to improve the water quality in that region. This funding is generated by the water use charge, which is the charging to the end user who use the low water that is coming from the upper Beijing. It's based on regulation. It's very strong, the aggressive action of the government to maintain the water quality properly. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Dear participants, I'm done with my questions. Now I'm opening it up to you. You've heard their stories and the lessons and recommendations they're making. I open this up to you to ask them any questions you may have.
I think that government dominates the water industry in many countries much more than in other disciplines, and we don't see the investment in high-tech work in the water industry to anywhere near the same extent as the other private sector. For example, if you look at the aircraft industry, Airbus and so forth, they've pretty well got a free hand, and they've made huge developments over the last 20 years. If you look at the water companies in contrast, and you look at the design of wastewater treatment works, we don't have the sophisticated use of complex three-dimensional models. We don't have the use of hydroinformatic tools to take us forward to the next generation of water treatment works. I'm generalizing. And also, in my experience, I've been heavily involved in the UK research assessment exercise. When you bring people in from Airbus, for example, or Rolls-Royce on your expert panels, they are publishing EDF, just not to make it British. These people are writing their own publications in top quality journals. You don't find that in the water companies to anywhere near the same extent in Europe, in my experience. And I think we suffer from this, and that's why, in my view, water is still dominated very much by governments rather than the private sector. And that holds us back.
Any other comment?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm Minna Hanski from Finland. I think one of the main challenges for governments is to ensure the water quality also in the long run. And I think there it is very important that we have this global discussion and sharing experiences. And besides those best practices, I also think that it is important to learn from the mistakes other countries have made. I would like to share a couple of experiences from Finland. First of them is this poor maintenance of water infrastructure. I think that water has been even too cheap, or then the money has gone to other purposes. But I think many utilities are not prepared enough to the regular maintenance of the networks, and that's a problem at the moment. And the second one is the structure of water utilities. Mr. Chirampa, you mentioned that you have a challenge to develop sustainable wastewater treatment in small villages. In our case, we have noticed that those small water utilities can be a real problem. That if we have a professionally managed big utilities, they work very well, and also private water supply, private wastewater treatment works quite well, because people have this self-motivation if they have small wastewater plant in their backyards. But this village size water utility can be a problem somehow. So I think, of course, communities and people and environment are really different in different parts of the world, but I think it's important also to notice that this kind of experience exchange is also important.
Thank you very much. Any other third one? Okay. While they're thinking of the third question, may I come back to the panelists and ask them to respond to the two issues? The government domination which we've had, which is at the exclusion of other innovative players. What are your comments to that? And also the issue of learning from mistakes. What would you like to comment on that? Who wants to start? You start, go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
I think, it's important to learn from mistakes made by the others. I think the question how you organize that is sometimes difficult, because we've also trying to develop case studies and no one wants to have the mistakes written down. So it seems that learning from other people's mistakes can only be done orally and not attributed to someone specific, or you can then maybe describe mistakes made by the others in a broader way once you've collected them. I think that I'm still thinking about your comment on innovation in the water sector, because and that's also what I've heard from the waste, but maybe for the same reasons, waste sector, that it's averse to innovation. And but I haven't finalized my thinking on that. You're saying that the reason might be that it's in the hands of governments, but another might be also the incentives for businesses to invest in developing new innovative technologies. That might be another reason for sort of the lack of innovation in that sector. And that has to do with maybe also the price of water, or stringent regulation that's being enforced that private companies have to comply with. That might be another reason.
Good. Antonio, would you like to comment on the issue of how does the Brazilian government accommodate or promote the engagement of the private sector in water, and also promote innovation?
In Brazil, the water supply is a competence that belongs to the municipalities. The central government, the federal government, and the governments of the provinces or the states, they are none of them the owners of this concession, of this service. It's in the hands of the municipalities. And I say that nowadays there are good practices of public services with very good indicators, and there are public services with very bad indicators, and as well we have got very good private ones with optimal indicators, and privates which are really horrible, that cannot be maintained in any case. So in Brazil, we have got from all these things, all these kind of things, the law of Brazil, within the law of Brazil, the private people can render services, private businesses can render services of water supply, collection and treatment of wastewaters, and we are a free country, and we are experimenting every modality. we have made many mistakes in the past, mainly when the government, the central government, invested a lot of money in the cities, in the municipalities, and, for instance, they started the work, and when the mandate of the mayor or the authority finished, the work was unfinished. It remained like a monument for the human stupidity, and this is something that has happened very often in Brazil. There are many difficulties, and nowadays the law puts many difficulties, many hinders us from doing this. And even Anna has started with a very interesting program called PRODES, which is in the website of Lana. And we, the government, are not transferring any money to the municipalities. We say that we buy the results. We subscribe a contract with the municipality. The municipality, thanks to this contract, they make funding together with the bank. They build and operate in the depuration plant, in the cleansing plant, and then we can see the corresponding payment that has to be satisfied for this service. So the public treasury is not in risk of losing this money, because we only pay when it is operating with positive results, when the service has got a positive result. So we are decreasing in Brazil very much the resources of transferring too much money for a municipality to build up a very big building with no results at all.
Thank you very much. So it looks like
Muchísimas gracias.
You are allowing the involvement of other actors in the water sector, but also you've learned from your mistakes. Young, do you want to add to that? Have you now put your thoughts together?
Yeah. One thing that I want to comment is about the technology application into water sector is a very important thing. And I hope that the technology can be improve the management of water quality in the water sector. So because I mentioned in the people in the water quality, the monitoring station, IT technology can be applied to the water sector, like the water, smart water grid is kind of one of good example. Also, in the rural area, it's very important to apply, because that small utility is not easy to manage by own the local government. So that's why Korea want to change the utility by the consolidation. So institutional consolidation is work. Also, technology can be applied by the remote management of the water quality. That is a good example, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. So apparently there are examples of where technology is improving, but certainly I think there's a point there that we need to work on getting the technological development increased. But I also think the SDGs gives us an opportunity to do that. For example, like I said, now we're talking about reuse, resource recovery, all those things. I think that would also open up the use of technology in the water sector. And the next round of questions?
Maybe also
Yeah.
Thank you. My question is, I think we have heard quite amply in relation to, measuring the quality, particularly coming from municipalities and water supply system. Could you tell us also the experience from preventive measures of pollutants? For example, we haven't heard much about polluters pay, like non-point sources, for example, from watersheds and agricultural systems and so on. Is there any experience actually to do some interventions or capacitating farmers in the rural area or industries and so on not to pollute Measuring after the system is polluted is one thing, but the preventive measures like what we have heard this morning, which is actually forced due to water scarcity, is there good example and experience with respect to non-point polluters and industries and so on, with respect to preventive measures before being polluted?
Thank you. Any other question? We'll take two again. David?
It's just really a question for Anja. I think what you're outlining is a very, very interesting and exciting development. What concerns me is most of the expenditures, particularly from governments, are constrained in terms of the procurement procedures. And that tends to put quite a big hurdle in front of the relationship between a potential provider and the needs people. And I just wonder how you're handling that in the structures that you're setting up for the workshops in particular, to make sure those procurement hurdles don't stop the relationships and the innovation.
Good. You want to start again?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
if someone has something on the first.
No, you go ahead with it.
Because I don't have anything to respond to the first
You
question.
respond to the last one.
The consultants that are identifying the needs in the respective countries are familiar with the procurement policies, but I think that where the system comes into place in general would be when an entity sort of is putting out a call for offers that would then need to comply with the procedures in that respective country.
Good. Go ahead, Yong. You want to respond to the issue of what are you doing, what are governments doing to promote non-pollution, to stop pollution? Would you like to respond to that, what Korea is doing?
Yeah, actually, the non-point source control is very, very difficult compared to the point source control. So until now, Korea is more focusing on the control of the point source. But we have still more work on the point control. But in order to managing the non-point source control, we need more strong governance among the central department of the government too, because most of the source coming from agricultural sector, not the industrial or the urbanization area. But so that's the one big challenge for us to managing the non-point source control. So because it's not the technology, it's kind of the some governance issue, and also it's kind of the administration policy to managing the non-point source control, because the agriculture area has so many different activity, but we don't know exactly what they are doing exactly. So first of all, we need to figure out some information about that too. So that is the big challenge for us, actually. Yeah.
Antonio, the whole issue of awareness creation, is it not helping in terms of reducing pollution in Brazil?
Well, in my country, we are walking our way little by little, and today we have two major challenges in terms of water pollution. The main one being the pollution with the municipal services of water treatment, wastewater treatment, in Brazil, we just treat half this water. And this is a big problem that we are trying to solve. We are working very much on a national sanitation plan in order to be able to solve this. The second biggest problem is in terms of agriculture. The industrial problem has been solved around 10 years ago with higher taxing. The problem is that the farmers do not pay when they use fertilizers and pesticides, and therefore we have phosphorus residues that are present in the fertilizers and in the agrotoxics, and that is in the pesticides. Therefore, we start work by trying to create awareness raising of the farmers. The work we are carrying out is to pay the good farmers, that is, the farmers that do not use chemical fertilizers or agrotoxic substances, and therefore by the payment per environmental service, we have created the water producer figure, and we are paying the good farmers. Even Brazil has today over 20 million hectares in a production system that does not include earth movement. It is an initiative that we are using in order to decrease the pollution, especially the sediment, the deposit of sediment in water. And we are going to have to solve this as fast as possible.
Very much. Again, here it seems as if there are some promising approaches. We're approaching the end of our discussion, and I would like to ask very quickly the participants, starting with you, Antonio, to say in two sentences, the take-home messages you want to give the participants on what you think the role of government is and the lessons that you think that should be considered that would help us to achieve the SDGs. You have 1 minute to do that.
Okay, yo quería hacer
I just wanted to use an image, a picture. Yesterday we heard Mr. Joachim Harkim working on the road that is going to take us to the SDGs, sorry. I think that this way that he has shown to us is a very important opportunity window that we have in all discussions on climate change. I think that rather than ever, the time is coming to have the advances on this discussion, mainly on the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to highlight again that technology doesn't come into play in isolation, but yeah, it's one factor, and what we also need is, or what it's also linked to is finance and capacities. And as I've said, that the standards and the regulatory environment, including an environment that is conducive to innovation and commercialization, is important.
Good. Thank you very much. Young?
Yeah. As I said, when we think about the water quality management, we need to consider not only how much the water clean, but also we need to think about how worth the water is. That is the important thing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I've come to the end of my session of facilitating this discussion. For me, the take-home message is clearly, if we want to make progress, the SDGs are a huge opportunity for us. The starting point is with the governments if we want to make a difference in water quality, and the SDGs will help us if water quality, the target of water quality is retained there, and we should do all we can to ensure it's retained there. Beyond that, we have to impress it upon the governments that they have a huge responsibility if we're going to make a difference in water quality, in terms of developing frameworks, in terms of providing incentives, in terms of enforcement, etc., facilitating innovation. Governments have a huge responsibility, and we have examples out there that we can build on. Thank you very much from my side, and I would like to hand over to the boss, Jens, and yourself.
Very much. This was a very interesting panel discussion, and after you heard the take-home messages of the panelists and our moderator, I have the pleasure or the challenge to try to wrap this up and also provide my 5 cents to the take-home messages. And I hope I do justice to the diverse cases that we had. I think we all have learned, or we all know that water quality is going to be, addressing water quality issues is going to be a challenge for governments. It's something that is newer than maybe water quantity measurements and things like that, issues like WASH that are well known and established, but it's a very important one that is needed to ensure sustainable development. For that reason, it's covered in the Sustainable Development Goals that were proposed. We've also seen it's a very multifaceted problem or issue to address, and I don't want to read the whole target 6.3, but just mentioning again the main aspects: improve water quality by reducing pollution, for example, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater, and increasing recycling and safe reuse. These are all kind of different issues that, in combination, add to water quality aspects, and it will be a challenge for governments to respond to all of these, because you need a wide range of skills and opportunities and technologies to address these. But luckily, we're not starting from scratch. There are many cases available, many good examples and approaches that we've also heard today. And I would also like to refer once more to the cases that have been submitted with links to further information and documents that have been provided. So feel free to have a look at those. I think what was interesting today was that we had a wide range of topics. We had a wide range of regional spread. So we have cases from Asia, from Latin America, from Europe that was presented in the overview presentation, and a global case. We're also covering different levels: village, state level, national level. So there are different aspects that we have covered. Now let me jump quickly to a few of the tools that have been presented and highlight a few of the points that that kind of were apparent. Let me not go try to recapitulate the whole cases, but just quickly to the Duero River Basin, the case that was presented in the overview presentation. I think the key point there was that it's not a challenge of finding the appropriate technologies, but it's the issue of awareness. And they addressed it by having these mayor schools, trying to create awareness at the village level to address this issue. What was very apparent in the Brazilian case, and I think it's worth picking out, is the trigger was to a large degree the environmental consciousness of the Brazilian society asking for water quality improvements. So this trigger, I think, is one of the important points that is a key plays a key role in activating governments to act. Also, in the Brazilian case, this led to the water quality evaluation program, and what is quite nice is that they already transferred this knowledge and capacity to other countries in the Latin American Caribbean region. Jumping to the case of Korea, there we have a strong drive from the government. So it's also a strong driver and supporter of these initiatives, and it's due to the strong connection that they see between water infrastructure and development. Addressing water quality is addressing water security, is what has been mentioned. That's, I think, a very important observation that we come to, and it was addressed with strong reforms, building up the national water environmental master plans, and so forth. And finally, at the global level, the WIPO Green database, providing a platform to find appropriate technologies and also to indicate needs for certain technologies and try to match up needs and appropriate measures to address them. So my key points or take-home messages, usually I know one is supposed to have 3. I have 4, so forgive me for that. So number 1, I think, is political will and determination to address water quality is essential. And there are different ways that we can go about achieving this. We've heard drivers can be varying, civil society, also basin organizations can play a role, governments, and so we should kind of try to find ways that we can also raise the consciousness of water quality issues and contribute to generating this political will. The second one is appropriate technologies are essential, and this is something that we already know. A new tool is this technology marketplaces, and I think one of the big things is going to be to make this known and well used, bringing it to many people and make sure it's used in an appropriate way. The third is monitoring and measuring is important. Without knowing what the water quality status is, it's not easy to assess water quality status in the first place, also not to see whether improvements are being achieved or not. And the second point that goes with it is data sharing, both at the national and at the international level. And there are also luckily already some good examples available in Brazil that we had in the case, but also what has been mentioned with GEMSTAT, Aquastat, and the World Water Quality Assessment. So they're all approaches that are already on the way. And last but not least, my fourth point is capacities which need to be developed, both at the human level, technical capacity, institutional capacities, and also financial capacities are important to address this water quality challenge. The good news is also that there's much expertise already available, both with experts that are present here at this conference, but also through the UN Water mechanism, through its members, partners, and programs. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your participation. Thank Thomas for his great overview presentation and moderation, the panelists for their nice statements and cases they have submitted, as well as the audience for the questions and the interpreters to help us understand each other. So with that, thank you very much. Goodbye.
So, thanks a lot, Jens. This has been a very nice session, and thanks to Thomas also and all the panelists. Very fruitful, I think, and very interesting to look now also into the water quality issues. Now, some of you have probably sticked around for quite some time this afternoon. We still need to have a couple of minutes to wrap up the entire stakeholder